Welcome everybody to today's session of Embodied Impact, where one of our primary focuses is around exploring the relationship between sexuality and abundance. Today we have the pleasure of welcoming Giap Tongsayor. She is a wellness coach and holistic healer. Her passion is healing through story sharing accompanied by tangible tools to assist those on their healing journey. Currently, Giap is holding workshops and talks around conscious kink and why this was the start of her journey in healing her sexual trauma. I've been privy to quite a few conversations already with Giap, and these have always focused around sex, relationships, sexuality. I can honestly say she is immensely insightful, and I've particularly loved the caring reflections that you make with people in that space. So and Toby would love to welcome Giap to the space to share it with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Jumping right in, I'd love to know what brought you to the space of conscious kink, and potentially in there for the people who've never actually really even touched on the subject of kink, maybe give them a little bit of insight into what that is.
Yeah, of course. So I'll start with my journey, and my name's Giap Tongsayor. I was born in Thailand between my village and Bangkok city. So I guess my journey starts from there on the relationship or understanding of sex, my role as a woman, and the dynamic within the Thai culture of sex and money. So it's not, secret that Thailand is known around for sex and for women marrying Western men to live a more prosperous life. So I was very much taught my role as a woman is to find a nice white Caucasian man who is going to take care of me and my family. So it's very much embedded in me that was my role, and my responsibility as a woman is to be a good wife for a nice man from overseas. I think from there I learned at a very young age that the role with sex was very much based around a survival. So how is it that sex could be used, or my femininity or my sexuality could be used as a way to survive for a better life for myself and my family? And through that programming, I guess it's led me to a lot of maybe confusion around that of self-worth and self-love. When I came to the UK, I was very rebellious and did not have a clue what feminist movement meant or looked like. So I jumped on that bandwagon. I was like, I'm not doing all the things that I was trained to do, and ended up in really bad relationships where I was sexually abused by my partner. And then later on in life, gang raped and sexually abused there as well. So it was it's kind of like these program misunderstanding of sex, misunderstanding of the role as a woman that led me to these unfortunate paths. And in this journey of trying to make sense of everything and understand how to heal my sexual trauma and shame, and also at the time of being scared as a woman, in my body and feeling unsafe in my body, I became very promiscuous. Through this being very promiscuous and probably causing more damage and running down the rabbit hole, I found myself, I guess my first healing modality was being a dominatrix. That was the first time I found power in being a small Asian woman. I found power in the physical act of having power over a man, like Caucasian men as well. So it felt very empowering to find myself in this different dynamic that I have never heard of before in my life. That was, the first time I felt strong as a woman. I felt the amazing power of my sexuality, not as a tool just to make money in this space, but one where I felt desired without having to sell. I may be selling my time, but I had not to how to sell my body in that way. So that went really well until I almost killed a client, and that really broke my heart. So I stopped. I went on a very deep journey of trying to heal and understand myself through multiple studies, as well as having counseling, studying psychosexual therapy, psychology, and none of that really shifted what was happening inside, so I could understand logically what was going on and make sense. I guess in a trauma response person can rationalize things, but it doesn't move the physical and the emotional feelings that sits within the body. So I went searching again, and that's when I went and studied Tantra for 2 months in Thailand. And I guess that was the second stages of healing my sexual trauma, is understand how to shift these energetic trauma responses and start learning how to de-armor and connect myself back with my body. Through that, I guess Tantra kind of opens up this big wormhole of, what is sex, what is love, what is pleasure, what is intimacy to you, and how do you, honor your body in a way to receive pleasure. So it's almost kind of led me into this self-love journey, which took me on another path of energy healing. So I went and studied Reiki and Sakim at the beginning to heal my alopecia through a really bad breakup and a really bad time working for corporate. And through there moved into sound energy. And here I am combining all of my medicine that has got me to where I am today to share my story and share the tools that I've learned along the way to be the woman that I am. Still here, still alive and kicking. Did that answer your question? Have I missed anything?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm blown away every time I hear your story, and I just think that there's so much that we can learn from just everything that you said there. And I think we're probably going to need a couple more sessions to actually really unpack all the dynamics in terms of how you've actually come to this space, because I think so many people encounter similarities of what you've been through, hopefully not to the extent that you've gone through. But what I'm curious about is the forgiveness element. Knowing you in person, there's such a great energy that you have about you that is, it's almost like you when you meet you, your arms are wide open. Mm-hmm. That's the sensation that I get. And I guess what I'm curious about is how did you arrive at the point of not only forgiving yourself, but forgiving all the experiences that you went through?
Oh, that's a loaded question, isn't it? It takes time. Forgiveness is not something that comes easily, regardless if people, tell you. And there's so many, I've heard it so many times along the way of let go of the pain because you're only hurting yourself. But here's the thing, and we talk about kink. Sometimes when you have come from trauma, the pain is pleasurable, the pain is comforting, the pain is something that you are so used to that peace is the scary thing. So forgiveness isn't easy at times because it means you will have to release the stories and release your certain behaviors and have to make that hard decision to change, because you have to make the change. So how I got here is through time and through patience and compassion. Even when I didn't want to forgive, I gave myself compassion to know that is okay and that's serving at that time. But little by little, working on the self-love journey, I learned to forgive the person that needed the forgiveness more than anyone that has inflicted pain or being a part of the painful experiences in my life was myself. I think through that made everything easier, is to forgive myself for the decisions that I've made to my body, my time, my energy. But yeah, time and compassion to self. That's how I got here on forgiveness.
I think it's also super interesting from your journey. I feel the resilience but then also how really you've taken trauma and really turned sort of like poison into medicine. And what I'd love for you to go into a little bit more is this whole piece around kink, that the pain is pleasurable. And maybe unpacking a bit more of the elements of kind of the kink world for the people that are listening.
Yeah, and kink is such a broad spectrum, right? Because I always hear people say, "Oh, what's kink?" And especially they like to call themselves PG. It's the nice housewife thing. Oh, I'm not kinky. Like, do you like being spanked? They're like, oh, maybe. Okay, that's also considered kink. So it's such a big spectrum. But the first thing is that I personally don't like the word resilience, and I hear it so much in my day job in corporate, like, having resilience in my day-to-day life is almost seen as how much you can tolerate and deal with things. And the truth is that I don't know if that's healthy, but how I turned pain into pleasure, it's really, I want to say it's really simple, but it's only simple to me. But if you ever grew up being smacked as a kid, over time you learn to numb that pain, and over time you learn to channel. It's like channeling your energy. So it's, I guess, my threshold to pain, started at a very young age, and we spoke briefly in the green room about edge play. So one of the things I wonder is that for those that like me that maybe had a little bit of parenting, spanking and stuff at a young age, and our threshold is higher with pain, and we've learned how to cope and channel the different pain and pleasure point, is that building towards resilience. But then you're learning the different edges, because every time when you able to handle a certain level of pain, your parents might be like, okay, I need to find another weapon because the hand isn't working anymore. So and then this kind of like transpires in the sexual act. It's like, okay, it might be, rough sex 1 minute, it might be choking the next. It's like, where is your threshold? Because at young age, you've learned how to deal with certain edges and edge play. So you don't have a boundary, because at young age you've kind of learned these coping mechanisms, and you learn to, I'm kind of just talking at the top of my head now, but as we was talking, I was thinking, actually, I learned this at a young age, how to make it playful, how to make getting beat by my mom. Okay, if I don't show her I'm in pain, then she'll get bored, or like and then it became this game that I played. And it started again in my personal life in the bedroom. It would be a game like I could take so much, push my boundaries sexually, and that would show how adventurous I am, how expansive I am sexually, or how much I can offer my partner. But the psychology, I think, around it is very much the same. Like again, to use your words, the resilience or the threshold or the edge. So it's I don't know if that answers your question, if I've kind of waffled a bit, but that's when I'm trying to take back how this all started for me, where it could stem from.
It's
super interesting. I must have gone.
No, what I was going to say is that's an immensely powerful, because you kind of brought me back to my childhood. We got caned at school, so we still had really severe corporal punishment. Even to the point that we'd have to go and choose the stick ourselves to get caned with. And it really was a game. I think the emotional element behind it was really more I would say the painful side. But I think once you mastered that, it really did become a state of knowing how to manipulate and control that situation, so that you were always sort of one step ahead.
Yes.
And I just like the way that you... Sorry, say it again?
And owning that pain. It is no longer the person who's caning you that decides how much pain you receive, but it's you, the one who decides how much you want it to impact you. If that makes sense. But sorry, I butt in.
So you were going to say before?
Yeah, it's really interesting, that the perspective on on Kink, because I mean, I as a kid, I have not received any physical punishment, luckily. So, and
we can
yeah,
arrange
just
it.
Yeah, I was going to say, would you like to try?
We can arrange it.
no, I mean, but it's interesting. I feel like inclined into that space of Kink, but it's fascinating because yeah, a while back I was doing Krav Maga, and so at the end of the training session, it was always you stood there and like everybody kind of just like slapped like your body, basically seeing like, okay, you know, yeah, there is a sensation, but that sensation, like how you wire that sensation, yeah, goes one way or the other. But then I personally find Kink and sort of like this inflicting of pain onto my partner, it's very intriguing. And so it's, I think maybe leading into this other area, you know, where you were explaining earlier, kind of the shadows in the chakras, and how they play out sort of like in kind of our sexual intimacy. And I'd love for you to unpack this a bit more.
Yeah, so I guess I'll go into it as much as I can. So I was when I was doing, I guess, my own healing and looking at the shadows of each chakra. So one example that I was looking at was, why was it the root chakra? So let's talk about when that's in balance. You know, it's about stability, security, survival skills. And when that's in balance, you know, it causes chaos. You can like, you know, lack of money, lack of self-worth, all of these things. And then I was wondering, when I felt most stable and secure was when I was a dom. So I had power. But so when I'm putting the kink and the chakras in alignment, the root chakra, when it's in balance, what role do you play in your kink community? So if we think about the dom sub dynamic, are you the dom or are you the sub? And if you are your root chakra is in balance, are you playing more of a submissive role, or do you switch in that dynamic to play the dom to try to regain the power? And then you move into the shadow of leading through your ego, which is a dangerous space as a dom, because as a dom, you're there to take care of the sub. It is not for you to play for your own ego pleasures. It's a big responsibility, and it shouldn't be taken on lightly. So I think most of the time people would think it's quite, the way that the industry of the kink community, you know, has portrayed it, or what it is known for, could be quite, you know, statistic and negative and bad. But when you're actually in that community, or you've been in that dynamic, you understand it's quite a caring, nurturing, loving role. Everything else is just role play. That is consent through both. So that's how I look at, you know, the root. And then when you think of like the sacral, about being creative, this is where I start thinking, how do we, in like sensual and sexual, how do we move in our dynamic? Like, how do we lead with our sexuality? Are we able to tell our partner what it is we like, what we don't like? And this is where I bring the dynamic of the game. So, you know, the consent game, because it's allowing you to explore your yes and your no's. Most of the time, our creativity can be blocked because we may end up pushing our boundaries with sex and with our sexual partners. Most of the women I work with don't even realize that they're doing it. And then in the end, it's allowing it kind of blocks them to explore their sexuality, because they're role playing for their partner and not for themselves. So they're just putting on this time.
Giap, have you got an example that could actually kind of make that a little bit more colorful for everybody?
For the root or the sacral chakra?
Well, actually, I mean, you were hitting on a very valuable point about your clients, that, you know, they don't even realize that their boundaries are being pushed, or there's no consent there. You know, how does that sort of play out in the client?
So most of the female clients that I work with, so what's happened is that they come to me and that I want to be more sexual. I want to be, you know, a better lover. And I always ask, who is this for? And it's always like, oh, it's for my husband. And the question, you know, comes from, well, is it what your husband wants or needs, or is your husband wanting you to be more confident in yourself so that he feels that you are in your confident, desirable self, where he's not the one that's having to pull this out of you, and it's constant work to reassure you, you know. And these are the things where I think most women, when they go to sex parties or agree to threesomes, is because they think that's what their partner wants, and they think that's what's going to make them more sexually liberated or more sensual or be seen more desirable. So is that an example?
Yeah, absolutely. Which is an interesting point in itself, because I think when there is that confusion there,
Can you see me?
When there is that confusion there, it almost can lead to further trauma, if you want to look at it like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is why it is important to, like, when I teach conscious kink to couples, it's really breaking this down, you know, and making it playful and fun. So again, if we're looking about sensuality, sexuality aside, and I'm looking at the sacral chakra, how are both couples stepping into their sensuality willingly without feeling judged or icky? How do you make that playful? Well, let's play a game. Let's explore. What is your yes? What is your no? What is pleasurable? What isn't? And I think that way it breaks the barrier of expectations. And I noticed the male, like the husbands, are usually the one that has more shame around stating their sexual desires or their sensuality. They're the ones that's kind of like, yeah, I think, what if she judges me and and the women are quite strong-headed, where like, I want him to manhandle me. I'm like, do you because it's kind of like really confusing for guys. So yeah, the kink elements of working through these chakras, working through these shadows, getting people to dive deep where what it is that they truly want, how they communicate that, and give them these fun exercises to explore and do together. Whether it's through rope, whether it's through edge play, impact play, consent, you know, all of these things that could be quite fun, playful, not too hardcore with whips and chains.
In terms of alignment of the couple, what exercises, I mean, I'm not sure who's in a couple that's listening to us today, but what exercises could you give them potentially that would be something they could practice or take away from this conversation?
I love sense play. Sense play is one of my favorite things to guide couples in. And although it sounds very PG and I call it 50 Shades of Lame, you know, the whole blindfolds things, well, actually, when I guide couples, like removing all the senses and, you know, working with sacred plant medicine like cacao, bringing that taste. You can use cacao for body paint, you know, not just to drink and stuff like that. Using the sacred smudging to feel the heat, and then moving it through to the ropes, just feeling the ropes or the silk against the skin being held, just allowing your partner to be safe enough to be vulnerable. This is the gateway through deep sexual connection, through very gentle kink play. And then through there, you know, yeah, the ropes may turn into something more advanced, like suspension, you know, but these are the gentle exercises I welcome couples to do in their own space and time, to explore their yes and no's by observing the body, observing when the partner clenches up to when they're being welcoming. And sometimes I think, even for me, as I know, even if I want something, being the responsible one as the top or dom, or recognizing if your partner is tensing up because there is trauma there that they want it, but they're like, yes, and their body's like, no. So really paying attention to these things and taking ownership, like, let's slow down and let's let the body lead us. And I think that's really important for a couple to work together. And I think, yeah, once you get someone to be safe enough to be vulnerable, there's from my experience, no limit of how far you can go in your pleasure play.
I love that. Slow the body down, slow everything down so that the body can lead you through these things. It makes, I mean, it's such a beautiful analogy that we can use pretty much everywhere as well. And I think in general, especially in sexuality, we do need to slow ourselves down.
Yeah.
And you know, your guidance is, I'm going to come to one of your sessions when I'm in London. But it's just super interesting to see how that in itself is going to lead to more confidence in the relationship as well. Do you see that happen quite a lot in the couples, or there's still more sort of resistance on the men's side?
I think the men is more so. What I did, like the last couple event I did, the dance between the elements, I got the women to tie the men up, just so that they could see how it feels, the embodiment of to be held, and to show the women the amount of responsibility it takes to listen to a man's body, right? To pay attention to, is he uncomfortable because you are not making him feel safe? Now you know how hard it is for him to try and make you and your body relax. What is it that it's not a one-way street. So, and then after allowing the men to feel safe, to feel held through rope and protected, and watching them surrender and falling into their senses. I think that's probably one of the most arousing thing for a woman, is knowing that she can create this space for him to be vulnerable. And I think that always builds deeper intimacy anyways. But through them, things naturally, organically, dive into something more intimate and special. I had people, doing tantric breath work at the end, rather than just continuing with rope. But it's beautiful. I've kind of lost my trail of thought. You said something, and I wanted to say something quite important. You said something about the men. What was it that you said?
Do you feel that the men still show a lot more resistance?
I think the men shows resistance when the communication isn't clear to make him feel safe enough to try something new. So when I ask the women to see if they can listen to their men's pleasure points in their body and their arousal, and in asking the men, like the same way that we say to women, asking the men to slow down when he's eager to pull, running away from the true intimacy and trying to lead into the next stage before feeling into all of your senses. How do you guide him to slow down with breath rather than rushing into kissing or penetration? And although you can make it playful, giving him that space to question his eagerness to run away from this very pleasurable moment. And that, I think that's where the resistance is. It's quite vulnerable and it's scary. And it's training the women how to create that safety space for their men to do that, which I'm not sure is done a lot in today's world.
I think it's also really beautiful how just that whole piece around listening and really becoming super, super present with one another. And yeah, if I heard someone else speak about it, basically sex is how adults play. And I feel it sort of kind of like leads back to what we spoke about earlier, this sort of like childhood trauma coming out in like sexual kink fantasies. And I mean, honestly, also me here in the chat was saying it's a really beautiful link and a super great insight, this whole like childhood trauma versus kind of satisfaction as an adult. And yeah, specifically also when you spoke about the ropes and that feeling of being held, maybe we can go into this a bit more, because I mean, as babies, I have 2 sons, and when they were small we kind of like swaddled them in these blankets. Exactly. Then I have a blanket to kind of like, just when I sleep at night, make me feel like there's something on me. And yeah, so let's go into the like ropes.
Yeah.
How does that make us feel safe?
Right. So rope was my first, I guess, real physical healing modality that I used, because after all the sexual trauma and pain, and then being a dominatrix and not Even though I'm a very sexual woman, I'm not very sexually active. And I was very much still scared to be with a man, one, to just be sexualized, or to, to be rushed and to grab. And I didn't know how to feel safe in a man's company. I didn't know how I wanted to be touched or to be held without fearing these things. So when I did ropes, I would only be tied by women. And that was the first time I felt safe in my body again. It was a very long time that I even knew what my body felt like, what my body needed, what my body craved. And even though like I love cuddles, having cuddle from a guy was like, oh, it leads into something else. And then I didn't feel safe to ask for a cuddle. So the only thing I have is rope. And most of the times you see me on a Sunday tying myself up, giving myself a cuddle. But rope is, as my rope teacher would say, rope is an extension of your hand. And I will disclose that rope isn't a healing modality in the kink community, but it is my medicine that has helped me to heal my sexual trauma. And I want to make that clear, because there are a lot of people out there who, would say healing rope, and it is not known in the kink communities. Shibari is not known for kink healing. But yeah, for me, in the sense of using rope to, one, connect back with my body. When I hold rope and sound workshop, it is self-time, and the whole point is that for you to rediscover yourself, discover your boundaries, discover your pleasure points, and again slowing it down enough to know which part of your body enjoy the sensation of being touched and held. How tight do you like to be touched and held? And then also using that with edge play, with breath. So when you tie yourself leaning into certain body parts, and the more you breathe and expand, and let's say you have a rope harness, the tighter it becomes. And just seeing if you are pushing your boundary into trying to make things so restrictive, and where these desires to restrict yourself comes from. Are you trying to numb and disassociate, or are you trying to just play with your edges? Or is this really pleasurable for you? So it's rope has so many different elements of exploring self. And I think it's probably doing self rope before doing it with someone else is better, because when you come in and you can say to a partner, I like being held, being tied, being, compressed this way, it gives your partner more clarity and safety during intimacy and sex with rope.
I think it aligns itself really beautifully with self-masturbation as well. Anything sort of sexualized towards oneself, and the knowingness that comes from that experience gives you that additional insight to be able to share that with your partner, and really create that intimacy. And I mean, I've never really heard rope play from a position of being held, because I guess that sensation of restriction within myself, I have to learn how to surrender to that. Much like, having my whole body tattooed, it's creating a different kind of relationship with that pain. And so I guess maybe the question for me is, how do you guide people to get to that point or place of surrender? Because I imagine that that's really something that's that moment where that maybe aha moment comes in.
Yeah, and I think surrendering is the key thing here, is that when you're using rope, or I'll talk about me, when I'm using rope, actually, any practice I do, set an intention. But most of the time when I set an intention with rope is that, to move in a way that sometimes it's not about pleasure. Sometimes I want to feel the pain, because I'm unable to process into words this anger, this grievance, this, whatever it is that's going on inside. So as I use the rope to even feel the compression, the pain, I breathe into that pain, because I physically can't cry. So after this, talking to you guys, I will be tying myself up, and to the extent finding my safe cocoon in my rope to just surrender. And I think the surrendering part comes in, again, setting the intentions. Are you looking to numb yourself and transmute whatever energy, whatever emotion through ropes into something else, whether it's through pain, whether it's through pleasure, whether it's through disassociation? Have this conscious awareness and then lean into that. And I think that for me is the first step to the surrendering, because I'm aware of what I'm trying to do here.
Just said something really interesting there, that you're physically not able to cry. And so you're using rope. And I mean, I physically am able to cry, but I'm not really doing it often, you know? And so this is really fascinating. It feels like you've just given me some sort of like, Toby, go try this. Because I feel there is definitely areas where I want to, just surrender more. And so what you just said there with that being your modality to kind of process pain. Can you unpack this a bit more, how you do that?
Yeah, so when I first tied myself up, and it was, actually it wasn't the first time, this was around, I think maybe a year ago, Valentine's Day. I went to a local forest and I bumped into my rapist and his two daughters. And I didn't know how to process that. Like I was in freeze, and it was the first time I've seen him like face to face in that way, because all the other times I ran and hid. And as I tied rope, because it's like I was still sitting, and even though I've processed and I've cried and I've spoken to my therapist about all of this, that shock because of where I am now to where I was, and then this self-analysis and judgment again came up. And as I tied myself, and I folded myself into, like with my balsa, like I use a lot of yin postures with my ropes to allow myself to heal, doing the heart opening, doing the lotus, whatever it is, just allowing myself to not only use these poses, but using the ropes to help stretch and hold me as I breathe through this pain. And in knowing that in these certain poses and using the ropes as a way to hold me together and breathe through these sensations and through the fascias and the energy and the emotions started to, it's almost like my body started to feel held by me, protected by me. And I started taking back my power by using rope, because I was reprogramming that, or maybe reprogramming the nervous system that it is safe. And although this looked like pain, I'm reshaping, reprogramming how this pain is dealt with in my terms, in my control, with breath, with love, and with kindness, and with awareness. And just allowing these emotions to move. And then through that, the tears started to come, and the feelings and started to rise, and to sit with it, and then shift and change to another position, and then fold into that again with ropes. But the ropes really just made me feel like it's almost like having a big hug or having someone hold you through all of this. Your therapist can't really cuddle you when you're going through this, but as I'm doing this and as I'm holding myself, it's like my body is saying, okay, she's got us. We're no longer a victim. We're no longer in danger. We're doing this in our own way. So I don't know if that answered your question.
You've completely re-narrated the whole story. That's so stunning the way that you put that. And I think most people have that resistance to actually taking them to that site of pain. And I think the way that you sort of laid that out is so eloquently put in terms of stages, how a person can actually get them to that, get themselves to that stage.
Because not everyone cries. Like not everyone processes, pain or emotional trauma the same way. Like I tend to sometimes really numb and disassociate, but having awareness, and that's and it's not that I'm afraid of the emotions, and there isn't a right or wrong way to deal with trauma or pain, but figure out, be curious enough to discover what it is that works for you, and explore.
It's amazing. Thank you for, honestly, for the honesty and openness and transparency. It's really beautiful and so refreshing to, receive your open-heartedness. And you were speaking about sense play earlier, and that being one of the beautiful components. And then you also mentioned edge play a number of times. Maybe you can go a bit more into what that looks like.
Oh, again, another big spectrum, but I know we wanted to talk about trauma, kink, pleasure, and money. So I will give you an example of my edge play recently, I think maybe last year or the year before, with my Dom. And I wanted to reclaim my body. So, and this was part of, again, I'm forever on a journey of healing my sexual trauma. I wanted to understand and reclaim my body of when I'm with someone and things are going well, and I'm like, oh my God, this feels great, let's have sex. But then, like, actually, do I really want this? But my body's like, yeah, we want this. And I wanted to actually take control of me versus my body and understand the difference. So me and my Dom started practicing my edge play and my pleasures. So from the edge play was getting to the point of the arousal and then the checking in. Like, do you really want it? Like, do you really want, this level of intimacy, this level of penetration? And although my body was saying yes, I had to check in with myself whilst being tied up across the bench, naked and wet, and like, and even though inside I was like, yeah, I do. I was like, what if we say no? So the edge play here was in understanding, like pushing myself to this sense of needing, wanting, craving, and then pulling away. And I think that's one sense of edge play that I've done. But in the example that I'm giving, the reason why I did that was to reclaim back my body and reclaim my nose. So even if my body wanted to go further, I had the choice to say no. And I said no, even though my body wanted to yes. And that gave me back my power. It was almost like I had this judgment of myself before in sexual encounters that just because my body felt ready to receive pleasure and I wasn't 100%, that I just went on with it. I wanted to know that I had the power and the rights to say no and reclaim my body and be in a position where I'm not with a lover and then feel awkward, but train my mind to be the one to take ownership before getting myself into an intimate relationship. So I used my experience with my pro dom to practice my edge play to heal my sexual trauma of claiming back my nose over my body. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely.
I just wanted to draw I thought that was important in regards to trauma, using edge play and reclaiming my sexual power and my intimacy.
I wonder if we could put it out there and sort of just say that this is something that I think a lot of men don't know how to say in intimate relationships is no, because speaking as a man, whenever our partner is actually wanting a sexual relationship or to engage sexually, it's usually about performance. And just the simple no, historically can really, I guess, traumatize both sides. So the way that you put it there was really maybe something that all the couples can take away and actually going practice your nose in this so that neither one is offended by that, but actually really hear what the other one is saying. And, it's consciously aligning mind and body rather than just a bodily response.
Yeah. And that's the key thing, because the more you just allow your body to take over, you know, and not lead through like conscious and awareness, especially through your sexual pleasures, the sexual pleasures becomes numb because it becomes this routine or this job. And then going back, Toby, to your question about edge play, when you do the kink edge play, you won't have a boundary because you're trying to serve the other person. So an edge play could go from, you know, if let's say, what's a fun one, Massimo? Edge play through masturbation, you know, getting to the point when you're about to have an orgasm, and then the woman just puts her thumb on top of your penis, like, no, not happening. And it's just constantly that game that we play where you like almost through orgasm or through arousal. Another edge play could be how much how much you push your boundaries. Yeah, and another, I think, like breath play is edge play to me. I mean, I love breath play, but yeah, that's edge.
Which I think, you know, equally there, I think a lot of people are quite averse to the word choking as an example, whereas there's so much in just the holding of a throat as an example. I mean, coming from a position of a dom, that it's really, it was something that you said in the beginning, that it's reading the lay of the land of that person's body. And I think that's something that is super important that everyone needs to consider is how do you really start reading all the nuances that your partner is expressing, and equally yourself, you know, what are all the nuances that are coming up for you, to know exactly that biting point and holding them there in that sort of pleasure space.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and I always find with sexual partners who are not experiencing kink, I'm having to like lean my neck into their hands. They're just like, oh my god, I'm gonna hurt. I'm like, you're really not, you know. So it's listening to that as well. And I think also in the bedroom, you'll notice the woman will always like shuffle herself closer to you as and when she's ready. And so it's let that be the guidance. And so back to your thing about edge play, and that if a woman is craving for it, you could easily pull back, and that's also edge play. So no, you can wait for it, you know, let's go have ice cream. These are all little fun and games. It doesn't always have to be breath play or extreme kink. It's a little fun things that we do in between the sheets.
It's really beautiful, that spectrum that you're highlighting. And I think what's also interesting, sort of coming back to the beginning, when you spoke about the chakras and the balance, that when your life is really stable, you desire more kink in your sexual expression.
Sorry, go on.
No, because I also noticed that sort of like in kind of the entrepreneurship world, you know, kind of that underlying instability and finding these areas, what parts of my life do I want to be like totally fluid and expressive and explosive, and what parts do I want to hold like more stable in a way.
Yeah, like for sure. And that when we, you know, you spoke about entrepreneur, and we're talking about sex, kink, entrepreneur, abundance. And I think for me, you know, I don't know, I think I put posts about sex and money, and it's all about relationship, right? So the deeper we have a relationship with ourselves and our pleasures and working through all these blockages, the more creative we allow ourselves to be, the more we get to step into our truths and, you know, birth from our pleasures and show up from heart space and speak through authenticity, the more this ease of flow, because people want relationship with authenticity, with truth, and they can feel it. People will invest in people that they trust, that they want to have pleasurable experiences with. But you can't give someone a pleasurable experience when you not even have pleasurable experience with yourself. So I really do feel like, pleasure and abundance is hand in hand, and start with yourself and see how that unfolds with everything else. It's not one or the other.
You said something equally important in the beginning in terms of, I would add pain to that, maybe, because it's pleasure, pain, and abundance. And you were talking about sort of the transmutation of that, and I think there's something equally important that we, the re-scripting of that painful story, in essence, is that energy that you can direct to whichever, whatever place you want it to be.
Yeah, it's it is just a story, and it is just an experience. Like, we all have different thresholds to pain. So what may be my pain, someone across the world may think that's like, that's just little childish things. So it is our perspective, and it is our choice on how much we make that into, or how long we allow it to be painful. I think maybe that's the main thing. How long will you allow your experience, discomfort or uncomfortable experience, to block you from living in a space of abundance?
That's just really beautiful, really using kind of the things that express themselves sexually in your life as a barometer for, how healthy is my whole energetic integration. Am I like fully showing up, asking for what I want? Am I clear with my nose? And it's super inspiring to hear you speak about how you're exploring and playing, and I can relate to a lot, especially with areas when my life gets really stable. I want more like wild experiences when my life is really unstable. I really don't like wild experiences,
I had a client one that says that he hasn't made money. When was the last time you masturbated or had sex? He was like, I don't know. Have a good wank and then come back to me and see how it goes. But it's all this energy, it's all this, like, you're not doing anything. I'm not saying, obviously, Maxwell would probably disagree, like releasing your godly powers, but
I'm not the hugest of advocates of semen retention. I'll be honest. I think it's even the topic today, conscious kink. There needs to be that conscientiousness about it. I think that's the most important thing for me. Maybe your sex levels are through the roof and you're masturbating 15 times a day consciously. I mean, good for you. It's amazing.
Yeah, but I think when I find my male clients is that when they're stressed, they almost either want to have too much sex with disassociating, or they want to have none of it. It's like they're not worthy of pleasure, And then in the dom sub world is, when like I'm not worthy of pleasure, I'm gonna go in chastity for you. When if you want to go in chastity, just go in chastity. You don't need you don't need me to tell you to go in chastity. But there is this need, this honorable need to be in chastity for something greater than themselves, because maybe they're not feeling worthy of receiving pleasure, abundance, wealth, acknowledgement. So they need to give something to receive something. That's what I found with my male clients around abundance and pleasure and kink.
I mean, what do you tell people like when they feel like they're not worthy to receive? Like, what would be your sort of like entry point to resolving that?
It depends in what way they're coming in to see me. If I have a sub who's like, I'm not worthy, and it was discussed prior that that's actually one of their kinks, is to constantly seek validation. Most DOMs don't do the coaching, the counseling, or the healing with as a DOM relationship, because it's kind of like you blur the dynamic of the traditions of a dom sub relationship. So I don't advertise myself as a dom, but as a overall conscious kink educator or support. And I think if a guy comes to me and that is his kink, and then we will work through the shadow work of where does this come from, and then maybe find playful exercises that still serves his kink whilst doing the shadow work. So that's what I would say. But if a woman comes to me and is like, I don't feel worthy of receiving pleasure, then again it is creating that safe space of discovering where this really comes from, and then doing some healing work, whether it's through Reiki or sound or coaching, really diving into these pleasure points, the de-armoring of the yoni. One of the biggest things I ask my female clients to do is the Honopono whilst holding their yoni. And what does it feel like to forgive your vulva, your body, for participating in things that you are now feeling regretful of in those experiences? So
maybe just one last question. Is basically kind of the sense that I'm getting more and more while we're going through this conversation is like all sort of like desires for kink, entry points to unresolved trauma.
Ooh, wow, yeah, that's a big question, and I'm actually been pondering around this, and it's something I would really like a team to do some real analytical research on, trauma and kink.
Let's do it.
Yeah, because it's something I'm very passionate about as well, and I think that's what you're passionate about as well. But I would, from childhood beatings and canings to, having the resilience and threshold and edge play, do I think all of it? Oh, I feel like my dom friends would would be so upset with me saying this. I think there are always underlining reasons for our actions, for our desires, and I think they all stem from childhood. So I'm not going to say all sexual pleasures, kinks, and desires are trauma responses or, that's led to this. But somewhere in the childhood, there was a seed that was planted. And I would be very excited to discover where these things come from.
And I think through self-practice as well, I think it's an important sort of avenue to go into to actually ask that as a question.
Yeah, and I think that's the first thing with me with the conscious kink is having, these database of actually asking these people who are coming to me and going on a journey with them to discover where these kinks and pleasure comes from. And if we can unravel and heal the trauma and then use these kinks, pleasures in a way where you are surrendering into it more rather than disassociating, will it be more pleasurable for you? And then isn't that more rewarding?
Sounds like an amazing research project. I love that.
Yeah.
Giap, thank you so much for sharing this space with us today. I think we need to have you back again so we can explore even more.
Yes, lots to dissect from today.
Yeah, so for anyone who wants to get in touch with you, we left all your links in the description.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, if there's anything else that you want to share, please do.
Yeah, if anyone's curious to go on a journey, I am doing 7 weeks of conscious kink that's starting in July. And we will be exploring all these wonderful things of embodiment, mind, body, connection, and exploring your pleasures and your kinks in a safe way. That's
super exciting. Yeah, if anyone wants to join the community, just click the button on the video. And Giap, thank you so much for your open-heartedness and wisdom and really sharing the medicine that you found.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure being here with you and your community.
Pleasure for us.
Beautiful humans. Lots of love. Have an amazing week.